Hey, greetings. Thanks for joining me. It's Fred in Alaska, of course. Want to thank those viewers from Malaysia and Hong Kong. I had no clue. Expo footage. I'm waiting for the other half. My GoPro overheated halfway through. Should have that footage lined out here before too long, within the next video or two, and share the conference with y'all. What I wanted to share with you today comes from a guy named Timothy. He said I could use his last name, but I'll leave it out. But his first name is Timothy. Back in, it was 1987, he went to Naknek for a fishing job. Didn't do too well. The guy he was fishing with just kind of jerked him around. But the opportunity, the opportunity came a couple years later, in 1990, for him to work on a drift boat. So he went into it literally, and it was a local guy from Kvichak, and he was fishing out of Naknek. Well, halfway through the season that year, they had some issues with their net. They had a net mesh that was too large, and the old timer, the old man that hired him, had some nets in his fish barn, or his net barn back home up in Kvichak. So they took a little wooden skiff, probably about 22 to 24 foot long, handmade, but it had an old 115 horse Evinrude on it, or something along those lines. And they go up to Kvichak. They pass Leave Lock, and they come around on the Kvichak River, and in the maps I'll show it here. Take a quick pause so I can remember when I'm editing to put it in here. So maps here. So as you can see on the map, where the engine started having trouble was right on that thumb that sticks out, right? So they come around that bend, and then they cut back in to that little tributary and anchor up, because the old timer knew what was wrong with it. There was some problems with the boot and the lower impeller, and he wanted to fix it before it broke down totally, because it's all he had. So as Tim is talking to him, you know, he's only been working with these guys a little over a week and a half, maybe a little longer. And you know, he was the outsider. He was the white guy, the Kvichak. You know, he was listening to the stories, and he had heard him talk about some hairy man sightings like days beforehand, but he didn't know anybody, and he didn't know the context of the hairy man. So he was just like, whatever. You know, he just thought he was being messed with, basically. Well, they pull into that little tributary, and they beach themselves. They, you know, Tim jumps out, sets the anchor in the tundra and whatever, so they didn't, you know, drift away or whatever. And they commenced to pull in the outboard on board of the boat. Old man always had the tools he needed, and they started doing their thing. Tim, not being a small engine mechanic, had no idea what the hell they were doing. He didn't even know mesh size or anything. He just knew pick faster and, you know, shut up and do your work. So Tim was 20 at the time, and he asked, hey, can I just explore around here? The old man was like, yeah, but don't go far. You know, a Kvichak will get you, you know, and they just kind of chuckled, and he didn't take it serious. He thought he was just being toyed with. Well, he grabs the rifle that the old man told him to take. He doesn't remember the caliber. He just knew it was the old man's hunting rifle. Open sight, no scope. And he took his own personal, small, little, tiny pair of binoculars, you know, like not much to him. So he gets out, and he starts heading, I guess it would be back due west, southwest, something like that. Just going up to this small rise where he saw trees. So he's wearing a bright orange poncho because it's raining, right? And as he's going along, he's following this little game path through the tundra and some of the, you know, the willows and stuff. And he keeps getting an eerie feeling like, I shouldn't go too far, but his sense of adventure keeps pulling him forward. Well, he gets to a part where he starts coming up the rise towards the trees. Let me set this down here. Coming up this rise towards the trees, and he's new to Alaska. He doesn't know anything about it. He just knows he's seen at least 5 very large Volkswagen-sized brown bears. So he's very aware of the bears, and he's very conscientious about keeping an eye out for the bears, right? So he finally makes it up onto this little rise. It wasn't all that, but walking through the tundra, when you're not used to it, it's like walking on a stiff waterbed. You know, you got to put in more energy to move it. It seems like it would be easier, but it's actually harder. So he gets up there, and according to what Tim said, he was sitting down, catching his breath, because he got tired of it taking forever, so he would jot and trot, and he's carrying this rifle he's not accustomed to, and he's looking back, and he can still see not the guys that he was working with on the skiff, because they were down the bank, but he could still see the little tributary right there. And so he's comfortable. He's like, all right, no, I don't see any bears. He gets up a little higher, and then he gets onto the opposite side, and he's looking, and there's this, it's a bit of a dip. It's not a valley, because it's not high enough rise to be a valley, but he sees this dip, and he's kind of looking across, and there's another little tree line across the ways, and he's just kind of looking around, just like, wow, I'm in Alaska, you know, really cool stuff, you know, things that he's going to tell his kids about. And as he's sitting there, he said he was there about 15, maybe 20 minutes tops, because it'd start, you know, in Bristol Bay, in the Bristol Bay area, we get these things we call squalls, and it's just torrential rain for about 10-15 minutes, and then it passes, and on it goes, you know. So one of those hits, and he's just kind of hunkered down, just kind of like, ah, geez, you know, just hating life in those moments. But as that's happening, you got to picture the clouds are low, and they're dumping, and it's variable visibility. So he can see across to the other trees, then he can't because of the clouds moving through real low. And all of a sudden he notices two dark spots across the way. And he's thinking, oh crap, those are bears. And he's not a hunter. He's not great at distance, but he's estimating about 300-400 yards away, guesstimation. I didn't check on Google Earth. People can do that from the pictures. I'll leave the coordinates up or whatever. So he's looking, and he's like, they're heading towards the river, so he wasn't too concerned. Well, the squall passes, and he stopped paying attention because the bears weren't close, and they weren't close enough for him to oogle over and go ooh ah, you know, nothing like that. He had no camera, nothing like that. So he was basically just sitting there kind of looking around, and he decides, well, it's time for me to head on back. I don't know how long it was going to take them to do what they had to do to the outboard, and I don't want to get fired for holding up the show. So he stands up, and he kind of stretches, and he looks back behind him, and he's scanning the area again because the clouds passed and he had better visibility. Well, he notices the two dark spots across the way. Now he only sees one, and this thing is standing up. And he said it was too tall and too skinny to be a brown bear. It had the shape of a man, but it was too big. He immediately knew that what he was looking at was too large. So he's like, what the hell? You know, so he's staring at it for a minute, and his binoculars are all fogged up. He couldn't even really, you know, see much other than what he was seeing with his naked eye. So he gave up on the binoculars, and so he tries to go up a little higher from where he was sitting, going up this little ridge, and basically a rise. And he was just skirting the willows and stuff, going along, working his way up. And as he's doing so, he would stop every so often because it appeared that this thing was just watching him move around. And he said he felt within himself that I don't want that attention. So he decides, I'm going to stop going up, and I'm going to start heading back down. So as he's doing so, this scream, guttural kind of scream, comes across, bellowing from the direction he sees this figure, and he knew instantly that's not a sound a bear makes. He immediately starts going back down his trail. Now he has to cut through this brush. There's about, gosh, not quite 100 yards of this brush, and he had a tough enough time breaking through the first time to get up onto this rise, because the game trails were low to the ground, and he wasn't going to crawl on his knees, right? So he's basically walking the game trail but having to force the willows aside, all that kind of stuff. Still bright orange poncho on. So as he's doing so, he's going back to his trail, and he goes, okay, I'm going to cut through here. And as he's doing so, he hears movement back up behind him. He looks back to see that figure still standing there, but now he hears movement behind him, and he remembers there was two black dots he saw across the way. One's standing up now, and now he's hearing movement behind him. He's like, well, shit. So he unslings the rifle, and he's just getting ready to cut through this trail. He looks back, doesn't see nothing. He's hesitant, he's feeling really nervous. Then a scream comes from behind him, and he turns around, he gets down on his knees, and he's kind of holding the rifle, and he's like, trying to remember how the safety worked on it. Again, not a hunter, not a gun guy, he was there to fish. So he's squatted down, he's on his knees trying to figure out, he figures out the safety, you know, kind of looking over the rifle, seeing how it's working. And he looks back up this little bit of a rise, and he notices this dark figure coming out of the willows. It was silhouetted to him, and again, overcast, silhouetted. It was very dark to begin with. The creature, dark skin, dark hair, steps out, and he guesstimates maybe 70 yards tops, something like that, maybe. And again, that's his rough guesstimation. I wasn't there to measure it out, but so he's like stuck. He doesn't know what to do. And then this thing up this little rise from him screams at him. He said when it screamed, he attempted to shoot at it with the rifle. There was no round in the chamber, so he took the safety off, but nothing was happening with the trigger. He wasn't familiar with rifles, bolt action or otherwise, right? So, you know, he figured just take the safety off, squeeze the trigger, it'll go bang, and then he can, you know, do whatever, protect himself. Well, it didn't work that way for him. So he's fumbling, he's trying to remember, you know, what he was supposed to do. Finally, he racks a round in and is sitting there, and he looks back, and this thing is gone. And all of a sudden, movement off to his left a little ways, the scream comes again. This time it sounds like it's just right on top of him, and he hears cracking and breaking. So immediately he says, screw this, starts running, trying to run through the willows on this game trail. As he's going through, he lost his hat, his poncho's getting torn up, but he didn't give a flying rat's ass. He was breaking through there. When he gets to the opposite side, he had been pushing through so hard, he wasn't paying attention. He was just terrified. He breaks out of the little trail and all the willows and stuff, and he tumbles over a couple times. When he did so, the rifle landed in front of him. He had to pluck off some tundra from it and stuff, and he's looking back on his back trail. And when he turns around to look back, he sees this thing about covered half the distance he did, and is standing up and much taller than the willows, and is looking at him. And so he goes over to grab the rifle. He raises it up again to try to shoot, but the little bolt was up a little bit. It wasn't seated all the way down for it to fire. It was up just enough to disengage it. So he's trying to squeeze the trigger, nothing happens. This thing screams at him again. So now he's like, crap, the gun ain't working, I don't know what I'm doing. He stands up, turns around, starts running back to where the skiff was parked. As he gets about half that distance, which isn't a short distance, back towards that skiff, one of the old man's sons was up on the riverbank because they heard the screams. He's yelling at him, hurry up, get over here, what are you doing, who are you screaming at? And of course he can't barely hear the guy. All it is noise at a distance. So he's not understanding, so he stops running, and he's breathing so hard he can't hear what the guy's trying to tell him. Turns around and look, it's still standing there in the willows. He doesn't know what in the hell to do. You gotta keep in mind, second time to Alaska, first time up the Kvichak River, like no experience whatsoever in the real woods. I think originally he was from, I want to say, if I remember correctly, he was somewhere in Minnesota. Familiar with the woods, but not the Alaskan woods, and he wasn't an outdoorsman or a hunter, right? So he continues running. He's just doesn't know what to do. He's beside himself. His shit's all tore up. He's missing his hat. He gets down to where the old man's son was standing there, and goes, "There's a Kvichak behind you, you know, what are you doing?" And he asks, why didn't you shoot it? Why didn't you shoot it once he meets up with them? And he goes, the gun won't work. And he was thrown off by how nonchalant the natives were about it. It was just, oh, okay, well, it's there. It's no longer chasing you. You know, we're good. It was at a distance, and we're good. It's not actively coming at us, so leave it alone. So as he's talking, he didn't want to turn his back. He was constantly looking back up the trail at this thing, and it's a bit of a ways away. And as they're talking, the kid goes, or the old man's son goes, "Hey, let's get in the boat, we gotta go." And he turns back because the kid got his attention. He stopped looking. When he looked back up the trail, they both were standing. One was a bit taller, a little further back than the one standing in the trail that he was on. He said he'll never forget that feeling he had when he realized all was not well. My hat goes off to him. It took a while to coordinate getting back, getting a hold of me and getting his story told and whatnot. However, they get back in the skiff, and there was still about an hour's worth of work to do on the outboard. So for an hour or so, maybe a little longer, he doesn't remember, he was taught how to properly operate the rifle, told not to shoot unless they come within very, very close distance, and he was set up as sentry on top of that little bank while they were working on the outboard. He got fired. That was the first thing that happened. The old man viewed him as bad luck. Once they got the outboard running, nothing further happened. They actually, he said when he got back up on the bank to keep watch, they were already gone, and he didn't see any movement elsewhere, and he was looking real hard. Was handed a better pair of binoculars as well, and was just glassing around, looking around, saw nothing. They go up. He's fired at this point. He was told he was fired, but still he had to drag the net bag, and he didn't understand that aspect of it. But anyway, so he had a hard time of it. He's tried 2 other times to come back up to Alaska to do commercial salmon fishing, and he just kept running into just hardships, whether it be from foul captains or cheats, things like that. But I want to thank Tim for reaching out and sharing that, because talking to the guy, I could totally understand. You got to envision this guy is totally green. He's up in the middle of frickin' BFA, and all this crazy shit starts happening. Now, in the big scheme of things, screamed, made a noise, he retreated. That's an overwhelming like narrative, in most encounters. My concern is the flip side of that coin when it's not so. But anyway, I want to thank you guys for joining me. I want to thank Tim again, and expo footage coming soon, and we'll catch you guys on the next one.